This is Comperj, the biggest petrochemical complex in Brazil. It's located in Itaboraí, a small city in the state of Rio de Janeiro. The multi-billion-dollar project launched in 2008, and the plan was to open in 2011. Thousands of Brazilians moved there to work. But it's 2018, and Comperj never opened. Police broke a case that would doom Comperj. In 2012, they had this gas station in Brasilia under surveillance. They suspected it was being used to launder money. Criminals would bring in illegal cash, report it as gas station earnings, and then funnel the cash to someone else, making the money hard to trace back. The police arrested a known money launderer, Alberto Youssef, and offered him a plea deal in exchange for the source of the money. But he warned his lawyers, "If I speak, the republic is going to fall." Today, some limited construction is planned to resume at Comperj after Chinese and Brazilian firms partnered with Petrobras. The natural gas unit is expected to open there in 2020, but this would only create about 5,000 jobs. And the problem is, the closing of Comperj and the devastation of Itaboraí is not an isolated incident. It happened all over Brazil and all over Latin America. Operation Car Wash successfully revealed systemic corruption in Brazil. Car Wash put ex-President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva in jail, contributed to the downfall of his successor Dilma Rousseff, and a related investigation has led to her successor, Michel Temer, being charged for corruption. The ex-CEO of Odebrecht was sentenced to 19 years in prison, and Ike Batista, once Brazil's richest man, was sentenced to 30 years. But the same companies were funding major infrastructure projects all over Brazil, so the scandal brought many to an abrupt stop. Like this nuclear power plant in Angra dos Reis, for instance. Like Comperj, it was halted in 2015 because of direct involvement in the car wash scheme. $60 million in bribes were paid out of the project's funding. By 2016, 11 projects were reportedly stalled in Brazil alone. It didn't stop there. The engineering companies involved worked all over Latin America, and in 2016, 17 projects were reportedly stalled in at least 7 countries. Like this irrigation project in Peru, where 3 former presidents have been accused of taking bribes from Odebrecht. In Colombia, this river dredging project was stopped after Odebrecht admitted to paying $11 million in bribes. And in Venezuela, at least 23 infrastructure projects have been suspended. These stalled projects mean lots of layoffs.
For our top international story this hour, we ask what the election of incoming Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro could mean for the international economy, particularly those countries which aim to challenge U.S. dominance over the global financial system. Under the leadership of the Workers' Party, Brazil became known as a powerhouse in the developing world, strengthening alliances with Russia, China, and other emerging economies. In 2010, BRIC became an official institution, including the member nations of Brazil, Russia, India, and China, with South Africa joining the group soon after. According to the Brazilian government, BRICS exists in order to assist members in coordinating on multilateral economic and political policy. As of now, BRICS nations account for 26.5% of the world's land area, 13.2% of World Bank voting power, 14.9% of IMF quota shares, and 42.6% of the world's population. But that strength in numbers is now threatened. That's because Brazilian President-elect Jair Bolsonaro is poised to realign his country with the United States. Eduardo, I noted on Twitter that if someone like Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro or Russian President Vladimir Putin delivered an address vowing to jail opposition leaders and cleanse society, the corporate media would likely be up in arms. However, outlets like the Wall Street Journal actually endorsed Bolsonaro. Why is this?
Well, I think it's clear that the market is in favor of Bolsonaro because he's vowed to have Paulo Guedes, a banker, as his finance minister. So what we're going to see is a deepening of neoliberal policies with austerity measures pushed down, the Brazilian population. So that's good for financiers. So that's it's a very unfortunate, but that's very clear why this is happening.
Audio Jungle.
Bolsonaro's election could impact the Middle East too. Bolsonaro says he wants closer ties between Brazil and Israel, and even wants to close the Palestinian embassy in Brasilia.
It will certainly be the first country I visit as a Christian. It will be Israel.
Bolsonaro's office now says Israel may not be the first country he visits, but will be one of the first. Bolsonaro has also said he'll move Brazil's Israel embassy to Jerusalem.
Since 2013, thousands of Cuban doctors have been working in Brazil. They're often based in remote rural areas where it's been hard to recruit Brazilian medical staff. They provide care to patients, some of whom previously have had no access to a doctor.
I would never make a deal with Cuba on those terms. This is slave labor. It's slave work. I could not be an accomplice to this. I am a Democrat.
Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel's visit comes a day after the U.S. imposed new economic restrictions on Cuba. Meanwhile, Putin said Moscow was ready to help Cuba modernize its infrastructure, including its rail network.
If there's one thing in the world you definitely shouldn't worry about, it's that fake Central American migrant caravan the xenophobic nationalists on Fox News have been trying to scare you into caring about or believing in. The whole thing is made up. It's a mirage.
We've got thousands of migrants heading towards our border, and the president is promising to send thousands of troops. Tell me why you think it is an assault.
Well, look, this caravan was organized by leftist groups in Honduras, financed in part by Venezuela. That all according to the president of Honduras, who told me those things personally.
I'm surprised Venezuela has any money.
They were, that's right. But they were sent north for the sole and exclusive reason of challenging the laws of the United States of America.